All right, codependency. So, very, very important topic. What is codependency? Quite simply, it is a pattern of relating to people. It is a pattern of behaviors that come into and infect and destabilize relationships. How does it work? Where does it come from? Let's talk about that. So, we treat a lot of addiction at NOM. Addiction. So let's say someone has like the psyche, right? Let's say at one of the core issues is alcoholism or drugs, right? So one of the core issues someone has is alcohol and drugs. So a lot of folks, they just come here to get sober. But there's an invisible kind of thing. Alcohol problems and drug problems don't just come. They usually come with like difficult childhoods and a lot of trauma and neglect and stuff in the generational lineage of a person. Very rarely have I encountered addiction that doesn't have stuff in mom and dad and their moms and dads, and so on and so forth. Or severe mental illness. It just doesn't happen. From where I've seen it. I've seen people who think they don't have anything, but then they work at things long enough, they're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Oh, yeah, I put that down. Up, yeah, don't like to talk about that. So there's reasons why we are conditioned to be how we are. Codependency describes a reaction to someone's unhealthy tendencies. So what you get is you get kind of a hard to define set of patterns. So everyone knows what drugs and alcohol looks like. It looks like hangovers and hospital visits and overdoses and fun times and not fun times and like people generally have a better idea of what drugs and alcohol look like, right? But codependency is very invisible. And the word codependency comes from, I think, 1950s or something. A codependent was defined to be the spouse of the alcoholic. Okay? Or a family member of a person with addiction. That was what the definition of codependency was. And so the idea is that if you are going to be in the orbit of somebody with a disease of extreme self-centeredness, because it has to be, right? We have to pursue alcohol and drugs or whatever with such one single focus that all other things lose importance. That's what it is with addiction. It's extreme self-centeredness. No judgment, that's just what it is. And so what happens to the people around a person, around such a person? They have to either make a decision. They either have to leave or they have to adapt. That's the only option. If you're going to be living with, being with, 24/7, somebody who is highly dysfunctional, it doesn't even have to be addiction. It could be like extreme OCD. It could be like extreme depression. It could be a chronically ill, chronic pain parent. When you're in the proximity of someone, you only have two options. You can either adapt or you can leave. A healthy person, so like alcoholic buddy's over there and he's like drinking away, and then like a healthy and he goes out on a date and she sees that he's like slobbering on himself and he's like unwashed. What do you think a healthy woman's going to do? Get your stuff together, buddy. See you later. Don't call me, right? That's going to be what it is, right? What's an unhealthy female going to do? Gonna try to save him. Yeah. Gonna see the good in him. Gonna try to, we can fix this. Not realizing that the initial year of a relationship is like the number 2 most stressful event in life. Integrating a new human into your way of thinking is incredibly stressful. Second only behind death of parents in one psychological survey. So, you think about that, right? An addiction is a stress-induced defect of the mind. You go into a relationship trying to fix them, and then how does it end up? How does that relationship go? Is it good? It's complicated, isn't it? So why'd she do it? And it doesn't have to be a she, it could be a him. This happens both ways. It's an equal opportunity thing, codependency. And the answer is conditioning. So a codependent person it's called CODA for short. You get conditioned between 0 and 11. That's when your emotional system develops and matures. What you have by the age of 11 is what you have. Your system is largely built, for better or for worse, by 11. So, what's it built with? It's built with relational patterns. Now, does a child have the choice to leave an alcoholic parent? Not really, no. Not in any healthy way, right? Children, they depend on their parent to be their frontal cortex. They depend on them for food. They depend on them for shelter, security. They can't just leave. And if they are doing that kind of stuff, there's a lot really dysfunctional in that whole system. And so how do we last? Okay, so we've talked about you codependent, right? Person with addiction. They have a way of being, and you have to be in a relationship with them. So what are some adaptations of thinking that you'd have to do to stick it out for 20 years? You have to start building some very powerful self-programming, right? Like, he might change. And try to see something positive in everything, denying the worsening of the condition, right? That helps. That creates hope. Hope is nice. Hope makes you get up the next day, buy him a drink because he's shaking. Maybe tomorrow's going to be better than yesterday, even though he's not doing anything to change. But he might. It's a way to talk to yourself so that you can justify staying in that relationship. It doesn't have to be alcohol, addiction. It could be domestic violence. Absolutely. So denial is a powerful one. Denial gives hope. And we all need hope to stay in any situation. Medical school was hard, but I had the hope that I'd graduate and become a doctor one day. So you can go through it, right? Really hard rotations, a lot of criticism, a lot of stuff. But you have hope. You have a hard job, but you know you're going to get a paycheck. Keeps you going. We need hope. So denial is a really great mechanism for generating hope. There's many patterns of denial. Compliance. Anyone try to argue with someone who's like an alcoholic? And they're intoxicated and not acting nice?
Just give in to them.
It's kind of a lot easier to just say yes. You can avert a big fight that way. Just say yes. Yeah. Sky is red. Yeah, sky must be red. You know the sky's blue. You know it's blue. But you don't want to get into a fight. Because, now and what we do is we repeat things. So compliance comes in. When we repeat things 100,000 times, it gets hardwired. And then we even go on to repeat it even when we don't need it or want it. That's the nature of repetition. At NOM, we repeat a lot of stuff. Because we're overcoming like negative living programming that's been encoded hundreds of thousands of times with repetition. So we got to uncode that. Repetition, it works. So repeated acts of compliance. Just don't rock the boat. Yeah, dad gets really mad. So just walk quietly. Low self-esteem. So low self-esteem, I took this from Codependency Anonymous. There's many ways to look at codependency, but this is just something I took from CODA, as it's known for short. Low self-esteem. Well, one of the best ways to talk to yourself is to tell yourself, to sort of convince you that this is the best you're going to get, is that this is the best you deserve. I got hit because I deserved it. I must have done something wrong. Not enough salt in the food. My cooking wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough. I'll try better next time. You see, when you start to talk to yourself in low self-esteem ways, you create hope. Right? In that, well, maybe tomorrow, okay, I can work on this. I can try better. I can change myself. He's not going to change. I'm going to change myself. And so this is a way, low self-esteem, a lot of trauma survivors, it's ingrained. How they cope with the trauma is, I deserved it. I'm bad. They're better than me. And that somehow justifies this suboptimal situation. Another one is control. I can't control this suboptimal thing, Buddy's gonna drink, but I can control my kids. I can control my spouse. I can control my work. I can control, and control is one of those things that gives you a dopamine boost, even if it has nothing to do with the thing that you really want to control. So the absence of control over here, that's okay. Just control A, B, and C. Just stack the dishwasher really exactly how you want it. They call it a rule thing. Just like live your life by these exact like little tight rules. And if one step out, this is how spouses of alcoholics traumatize their kids. Can't control the person with the addiction, so then transfer that to the kids by adjusting their life. Right? It's like a reflex, and it satisfies. It creates room so you can stay in the game longer. It's not bad. I'm not saying this is bad. Sometimes this is the only thing that keeps a person from suiciding. Not bad. But it just is. Can't control this, so I'm going to control this. Big or small, rational or irrational, it feels okay. Avoidance. That's easy, right? Got a conflict? No conflict here. And anyways, let's just talk about the weather. Abusive language. Turn the channel. Let's turn on the movie. Turn up the volume. Put some spiritual stuff on. Drown out the noise and just distract. And never really deal with the issue. You never really deal with the issue. And guess what? Issue comes up again and again because you don't deal with it. So then you develop deeper and more intricate avoidance patterns. These are strategies, and if you can avoid a conflict, that means that maybe you don't get hit as often. It means you can stay in it longer, right? So this is behavioral patterning that allows someone to stay with someone who is really dysfunctional. And now here's why I'm giving the talk. Because around every addiction is a set of behaviors that fit codependency. So why we talk a lot about dry drunks is if you cut this out and you haven't done holistic recovery, you're a dry drunk, meaning you have all the behavioral tendencies of somebody that is drinking, you're just not drinking. That means your life is going to be high stress. You don't deal with things the right way, they're going to keep coming back at you. You're going to have a high stress life. And the ones that I really worry about are the people who stop drinking for real, but they haven't done anything. Those people become high risk of suicide. They become high risk of developing other addictions that are more secretive, like gambling or other things. Because these patterns, this is what trips people in later recovery up. Yeah, they get sober, 12 steps, they address some of the things. They never go back to drugs and alcohol, but they don't seem to realize that they've developed some patterns of living from this time period that unless they deal with, it's going to end up in high-risk relationships that will bring about pain and tragedy. So after this thing is done, right? Done, quote unquote, right? You really would benefit from addressing the codependency. You have to address this first. If you have a drug and addiction issue, you gotta be sober. This is subtle stuff. Behaviors and patterns of relations, subtle stuff. You gotta be sober. You gotta be sober to kind of do it. But this is the reason why, there's common things like men stick with men stick with men, women stick with women in the first 12 months of recovery. That's like a common knowledge thing. It's not a rule, but it's recommended because in the first 12 months, it's the codependency stuff. Sponsors get into relationships and stuff happens and drama and all that. That's why it comes from. That's where it comes from. It is about understanding that these tendencies don't go anywhere unless you deal with them, unless you address them. How do you address them? Lots of ways. Therapy. If you have access to that, connect self-therapy in particular. Connect to self, connect to others. Healthy people. People who are going to call you out. So like a therapist, like a support group, like Codependency Anonymous is a good one. It's a free one. Got to find a good meeting, but if you can find one, it's a really worthwhile program as a next step to sobriety. And if you do that, you're more likely to get deeper into recovery and have a lower risk of relapsing. These patterns are quite deadly. I'm going to just tell you that. Some people, it happens sometimes in 12-step communities. Buddy's sober 20 years and all of a sudden he suicides. Chances are he probably relapsed, but felt too ashamed to tell his recovery community where he was celebrated as like 20-year guy. And so he would avoid. And the extreme of avoidance is just go suicide. That's like the extreme of avoidance, right? So that is my quick chat on codependency. Everybody with an addiction has it. And anybody who's lived with a person with a severe mental health problem, chronic pain problem, addiction problem that has spread itself into the life, if that's like a parent, a brother, a good friend, and if you're like comfortable around people who are in dysfunction, it's a very good thing. A lot of healthcare workers struggle with this. a lot of society has this, let's be honest. And that's okay. What you're aware of, you can heal. What you're not aware of, you cannot heal. So it's just about building awareness. Questions? This was just an overview. Codependency Anonymous, great program, free program, online, lots of groups, and some good literature, but there's tons and tons of stuff written about codependency. Please explore. Forgive me if I've misspoken or if I've offended, and do some self-care if you're triggered by any of this content. Thank you.